What's up, guys? Rob from the Lighting the Lamp podcast here, just to kind of cut in, and I just wanted to give you a little bit of an update. So, actually, right as we finished this episode, like no joke, not even 10 minutes after we finished the episode, the news of the Kyle Palmieri and Travis Zajac trades to the New York Islanders broke. So I wanted to jump in here and let you know that obviously some of the information you're going to be hearing in this podcast is a little bit dated, unfortunately, just because literally right after we finished recording, the trade became official. So you can kind of just take that for what it is. And we will be talking about the Palmieri trade with our trade deadline wrap-up video that will come out, obviously, next week. So, yeah, just keep that in mind. These podcasts usually come out the day after we record it. So usually we record on a Wednesday night. They come out on a Thursday afternoon, which gives me time to edit and everything. So just keep that in mind that, you know, anything we talk about with Kyle Palmieri obviously no longer applies since he was traded to the New York Islanders. And we will be discussing that trade as well as any other trades that transpire. From this point going forward, we are going to consider those trade deadline trades. So don't worry, we will talk about them. And like I said, just really bad timing, unfortunately, that right after we finish the episode, the trade happened. So, yeah, just keep that in mind. All right, anyway, enjoy. What's up, guys? Welcome back to the Lighting the Lamp podcast. I am here with Steve.
Hello.
And Tim.
It's your boy.
And this is our trade deadline bonanza, basically. We're just going to be discussing all different things about the NHL trade deadline, potential trades, where people might end up, and just all sorts of situations, because, you know, this is definitely a unique situation this year with the trade deadline, because essentially when you make a trade for a player, I think the guidelines now is it's down to like a week of quarantine, right, where you don't have to, it's not the 2 weeks anymore, you just have the 1 week of quarantine, but you're still essentially trading for a player a week later.
Yeah.
So I'm kind of surprised that we're getting close. I think it's the 12th, actually. 11th or the 12th, I don't remember, actually. I probably should have looked that up before starting, but, you know. We are professional here. Trade deadline 2021. It is
It's the 12th.
April 12th at 3 p.m. So, yeah, we're only 5 days away, and I'm kind of surprised we haven't seen more people going different places. I mean, really, the only major trade we've seen so far from guys that were on the block was Eric Stahl going to the Canadiens, but
They only got a third round pick for him or something.
yeah, I mean, the trade wasn't that big. I talked about it on a mini pod, or I think I talked about the last podcast that I did. I don't remember which one it was, but you know, it's just interesting to me that we haven't seen teams take a more proactive role in acquiring players earlier because of the whole, you know, you got to wait a week, essentially.
I mean, like you said, to that point, like the trade deadline essentially was this week. It would have been like this week if you to have them, and I don't know why teams are taking it to, you know, the deadline like they usually do, because they don't have much time after the deadline to really wait that week. I mean, if you're a team like Boston, who's in a dogfight right now at the bottom of the Eastern Division, right? Like, you know, I think they're third or fourth right now. They're holding on to the last.
Fourth, because the Penguins and Islanders are tied for second or tied for first. I think it's a three-way tie for first right now.
Yeah. So the Bruins are hanging on to that last the last playoff spot in that division, and I mean, they need help now. I mean, they have some issues they'd really like to sort out. They've been talking about getting help on the back end, maybe getting some depth scoring, because they are kind of a glass cannon this year. And, I mean, the only thing I'm surprised is they're not in the market for a goaltender. I know, like, their rookies have been good. Like, Dan Vladar has been really good. The kid that played last night was good.
Jeremy Swayman.
Yeah, they've all been good for them, but I think going to the playoffs with Tuukka Rask's iffy history over the last couple of years, maybe between the injury this year and then just totally leaving the team last year, and I mean, Yaroslav Halak is a good safety net, but he also ended up on the COVID list now, so who knows how long realistically he could be out. So I'm surprised they're not more proactive in going after like veteran help in the goaltending department or the blue line, really anything. The Bruins haven't really done anything.
Yeah, there's a couple of teams that, I mean, we're going to get into specifics. We're going to talk about these different teams, but I'm just surprised at certain teams that were struggling previously. Like, I'm surprised Philadelphia didn't make a move earlier before throwing the last week and a half down the toilet, essentially. I'm surprised that the Bruins didn't make a move earlier when they had all these guys, like especially their defense, all on the COVID list. I mean, let's just start. I mean, obviously the the two big fish on the market, both coming out of Buffalo at this point, is Jack Eichel and Taylor Hall. I think it's fair to say that Taylor Hall is as good as gone. I don't realistically see him not being traded, at least for something, even if it's like, pennies on the dollar for what his perceived value should be, because Buffalo really can't afford to just let him walk in the offseason, because there's like a negative % chance that he re-signs in Buffalo.
I mean, I think because of Jack Eichel's injury, I think like we can pretty much move him off the board here for this year's trade deadline, because I don't know a lot of teams that would be willing to shell out like the Kings ransom you need for Jack Eichel, which is upwards of 2-3 first-round picks and some blue chip prospects. And Buffalo's also looking for young roster players. I don't know any team that would be really looking to give that up for a guy who's going to be out the rest of the year.
The other issue with that is that no team that Jack Eichel would want to go to would be willing to do that right now. Like, you could maybe look for like a San Jose or like an Anaheim to maybe
even like an Ottawa,
yeah, but you're not going to get that from any team that he would want to go to.
Right, and that's really it. Like, Jack Eichel's made it a big point that he wants to go to a contending team, like a playoff team, or a team that's on the bubble of being a playoff team. I don't know a lot of teams that are in that situation that are going to be willing to offer such a king's ransom for a guy who isn't going to be playing for them this year. I mean, if he was still playing, right, wasn't hurt, I mean, obviously Jack Eichel would then be in play here, because it'd be a lot easier to swallow if you're a team like the Rangers, say, who's been linked to Jack Eichel, sending up the king's ransom and getting a player you can play. Whereas this year I don't think the Rangers are going to make the playoffs, I'm going to be honest. Like, they're playing well, but I think the Bruins have a big gap on them right now. And I don't think it might be easier to stomach if you're not. It'd be easier to stomach for a team like Ottawa, I think, more than a team.
Here's the thing, though. You have to take into consideration that a player like Jack Eichel, I mean, first of all, a team like I don't necessarily think a team like San Jose might, but I don't think like Anaheim or a rebuilding team would necessarily go in on him, just because the current cost, I think, is they were saying 3 first-round picks and a BA prospect.
I think Tim was just saying like.
I was just saying like a team who has the ability to dump with the look to rebuild or no playoff contention whatsoever.
Yeah, he's like, it's more or less like a team.
There are just very few teams right now that are in that position. An interesting one though could now be the Canucks.
Well, the Canucks just had 21 players all go on the COVID list.
I'm saying
which is wild.
If they fold the season, possibly, which could happen.
Well, yeah, considering
it'd be really interesting to see what they do.
Can we just talk about the Canucks real quick? So I saw a report somewhere that said among all the positive tests, that I think a couple of them are coming up with the new strain that's spreading in the United States, which has also now become the most common strain, which was different for the NHL because they haven't experienced any of that before. So now they're worried about that spreading even further. So this Canucks situation just kind of keeps getting worse for them.
Well, so the issue is that they did the tracing back to the original. Originally, it was just 2 players had tested positive for the Canucks, right?
Right.
And then a third one tested positive, and then they shut him down, and then now you've got this sweep. But the 2 players that tested positive originally have the strain, right? Have the mutation, which is why they're worried that the rest of them probably have it. And the report was that strain was becoming increasingly popular in Montreal. So they were saying that potentially the issue is when the Canucks traveled to Montreal.
And then got postponed.
That's might have been where it really started. So, as far as that situation with the Canucks go, I haven't really commented on it just because it's so fluid. It changes every day, and we don't really know what they're going to do. I mean, apparently the target date to start them back up is the end of next week, which
I don't know how you can do when you just add.
Happening,
they just added 6 more players today.
They have 21.
You have to test negative twice.
Yeah,
you have to test negative twice, which I mean, listen, it's happened, right? Like Rick Bowness missed the last 2 games with a positive test, but then he tested negative twice. So the theory was that the first one was false, right? But you have 21 players.
Well, that's really it, right? Like it's not a 2-week start date for like it. I don't know how you can set a target date for a team when you realistically don't know when they're going to have enough players ready to go, because you could be sick for anywhere from 10 to 14 days, 7 to 14 days, right? So it's like there's a window here that they have to try to like squeeze in, but guys are still getting sick. Like it's still making its way around the locker room. So it's like, yeah, the guys that went down in that initial wave, like Bo Horvat and like Quinn Hughes, the guys that got shut down that first time, they're going to be ready to go, but you're going to have guys like, let's just say like Jake Virtanen, I don't know any real names, but I'm just saying like Jake Virtanen or Louis Eriksson, who got it yesterday, who now had 2 weeks ahead of them that they can't. So are you going to punish the Canucks by forcing, and this is even taxi squad players now, so it's like, how are you even going to like logistically do this, because you're not letting teams call anybody up from the AHL? Like
also, like, the assumption that a player's just going to get this and then be over it in 2 weeks is, like, that's assuming something. Like,
Right.
people, like, granted, listen, most of the COVID cases we've seen in the NHL have been resolved within 2 weeks. You know, they're young, they're healthy, they're athletes, or if they're not even if they're young, like, even if they're pushing like their 30s, like, they're still healthy, they're still athletes, right? So their bodies recover quickly. But that's not to say that, you know, what if 5 or 6 players are still sick 2 weeks later? You know, are you gonna make them play with, like, basically the whole tax? And it's just it's an interesting situation. I'm glad that I don't have to figure out what the answer is. I just think it's ridiculous to think that they're gonna be playing by the end of next week. But
I mean, I guess the last thing I'll say on this, like, really, is that it's crazy to me that the NHL didn't have, like, a contingency plan for this. It seems like, I mean, they had contingency plans for more than just a couple of guys going into quarantine, right? Which is why the taxi squad is there. They were figuring, you know, 3, 4, 5 cases at the most, probably. I don't think the NHL was expecting, like, whole rosters to go down like this. So I really don't, like, it amazes me that they just don't have any plan. Like, I don't think the NHL knows what to do. They're just looking to start up, like, business like usual when this situation is not business like usual. You have an entire team, and that doesn't even includes staff too, I think.
yeah, I mean, to be quite honest with you, I don't really necessarily think you can plan for something like this.
Oh,
like,
no,
it's
I'm
just,
not saying
you know,
I'm not saying the NHL did anything wrong by not having a plan. It's just kind of crazy to me that like their game plan is business as usual and not to be like, okay, maybe we should approach this with a little more caution here.
Yeah, so I guess to kind of circle back to what we were talking about.
Yeah, sorry.
No, you don't have to apologize. The Jack Eichel thing, right? We have to consider that this is not a rental, right? Jack Eichel's under contract for, I think, 6 or 7 years at this point. This is not like a Kyle Palmieri or a Dmitry Kulikov where you're only getting him for this year, right? So why would you trade for a guy who's hurt and also on an expiring contract?
Right.
You don't. It makes no sense, right? That's why you see guys being held out of games. Like Palmieri didn't play the last game. I think Taylor Hall was held out of the last 2. But Jack Eichel's an investment not only for potentially this year if he comes back, but you're getting the next 5 or 6 years or whatever his contract is out of him, right? And I think that's why part of why, I mean, A, his asking price is so high because it's Jack Eichel, but B, because you know how much money you're going to be paying him. There's no question mark there. And you're going to have him for at least that amount of time.
Yeah, but if I'm a GM, right, and I'm looking to make a move at this deadline, say I'm like I'm Jeff Gorton, I don't really know what team's been linked. I know the Bruins were talking to the Sabres, which I don't know how the Bruins would fit Jack Eichel under the cap. Like, it's $11 million, like, or it's not that.
I don't know how the Rangers would fit him under the cap either.
Well, that's it. I mean, but I'm just saying, like, I don't know if I'd be willing to give up. Like, I don't know if I'd be able to buy in on him now.
Carolina also has a really interesting position with their cap space.
Yeah, Carolina's an interesting team in general. They're in a weird spot, I think, and I think it's a lot of it because of the division they're in. Like, the division itself is kind of a weird division.
They're pushing for first. Like,
well, I'm saying specifically that, like, they have the most cap space in the league available, I think, out of any team.
I'm just saying, like, they're in a weird situation this year because I wonder if. I don't think it's a fugazi, right? Like, I don't think, like, the Carolina Hurricanes are, like, a one-shot this year. Like, I think they're proving that, like, this is sustained success now, you know?
The Hurricanes have 7.5.
That's a lot.
You know, the thing is, like, I got to be honest with you, I don't think Jack Eichel's going anywhere this trade deadline, only just because when you move a player of his caliber, that takes so much time. That usually you see that kind of stuff happen in the offseason.
I'm imagining Jack Eichel gets moved at the draft, which is kind of what I was trying to say. Like, his value now is so high. Why would you trade for... I know it's Jack Eichel, right? I know you're trading for a 100-point player. You're trading for a 40-goal scorer. But, like, why would you trade now when he's injured and the asking price is so high when you could just wait till the draft? And if the asking price is still high, at least then you're trading for a healthy player. You know, it doesn't look as dumb as trading for a guy you know isn't going to play and giving up, like, all these picks and all these prospects who are already playing for you.
It's part of the reason why Luke Hughes might drop from his original draft position from before he got hurt.
Yeah, which, by the way, Luke Hughes is a fucking animal. Like, absolutely disgusting.
Just don't see guys of his caliber go at the deadline. Generally speaking. I mean, you've seen it before, but
you generally
these
don't see
kind
guys...
of trades take so much back and forth negotiation that a lot of times, like even last year when Zach Parise was on the block, who's supposedly going to the Islanders, like, they just ran out of time, right? They ran out of time. They couldn't get the trade file because there's just so much back and forth because there's so many moving parts with a trade like this that usually you do see it happen either in the offseason or at the draft. It's very rare you'll see a caliber player like him going at the deadline because it's just too difficult to navigate.
I mean, you rarely see a player of his caliber hit the market like this anyway. I mean, you never see franchise centermen really come around. The last time I could think of a franchise centerman that was, like, actively on the block, and it wasn't really actively, was John Tavares. And then, like, the Islanders, there were teams interested, but, like, the Islanders never pursued anything seriously, which came back to haunt them. But it was, I mean, in a weird way. I mean, you didn't get anything for him. I think, like, realistically, you would have liked to have gotten something. But, yeah. I mean, it's just weird that I understand why Buffalo has to, right? And why, because he's not happy. But it's just so strange that he's only, 23, 24? He's as old, same age as Connor McDavid.
I think he's like 24. I mean,
I think Taylor Hall is the more likely to go.
Oh, yeah, no, he's gone.
He's got to go. Yeah. If
Gonzo
you don't
Alonso.
trade Taylor Hall, then I don't care if you're an interim GM, like, you're still going to get fired.
I think the two that are most likely to go are probably Taylor. Well, Taylor Hall's all but gone. And then Rasmus Ristolainen, who's been on his way out the door the last couple of years. It seems like that every GM who takes over in Buffalo is trying to dump this guy, and I really don't know why. But
so, the thing with Jack Eichel is he's 24, so he's been in the league for 6 or 7 years now, and, like, we all know the story of Jack Eichel. We don't need to tell it. He's a superstar. The team has only gotten worse since he got there. It's kind of one of those bound to happen situations, It kind of parallels the John Tavares situation, but instead of him walking at the end of free agency, he's decided, like, he probably looked at the Tavares situation and was like, listen, like, he was only 28 when he got out, like, I'm not wasting the next 5 years of my career here if nothing's happening. So some of the names that are being thrown around on the block is Kyle Palmieri from the Devils, a winger, Dmitry Kulikov from the Devils, a defenseman, Taylor Hall from the Sabres as a winger, Ristolainen from the Sabres as a defenseman. James Reimer from Carolina has apparently been talked about. The Capitals apparently are in the market for a goalie pending seeing what happens with Lundqvist, which
I would love to see Florida possibly move Dreger and a chance to maybe make that cup run, maybe pick up a defenseman.
Well, they're going to
try and replace Ekblad for the season.
So, I mean, we can start talking about different teams and what they're going to be going for. I mean, obviously, Florida is tied for first in the division. They were they're near the top of the league. If you're the Florida Panthers GM, I mean, you kind of have to go after somebody, right? Like, you don't have a choice.
Yeah, you've kind of been like,
This is your best opportunity you've ever had, you might ever get.
It's also just like you have no excuse not to. Like, if you're not going to make a move now, like, when are you going to make a move? I mean,
what do they got, Rob?
This team's been, like, pressing for. I mean,
they put him on LTIR. They have 10.7.
And I just don't understand why, like, they don't take a shot on a guy like Shane Gostisbehere, who, I mean, just got waived, right? But earlier in the year, he looked like he'd regained a lot of his form, and then for some reason, he started sliding in the lineup when the team started to struggle. So, I mean, there's an option there.
That kind of indicates to me, though, that they want to go the rental route instead of Gostisbehere. I think has 2 years on his contract after this.
Well, yeah,
One or two. Like, he's not expiring at the end of this year.
Well, they're not looking to take on any long-term cap just because, like, they still have how many years of the Patrick Hornquist contract they have to eat, too, which is, like, up near 7, I think.
And, the thing is, Ekblad's going to come back next year.
Well, yeah, I mean,
so
barring...
They're looking like, I think they would be in the market for a rental.
I mean, Goligoski would be a nice piece for them, maybe. Veteran puck mover. He could eat some of those power play minutes for them. I mean, I think this is going to be obviously a 2-piece solution here for them than a 1. You're not going to get a guy to take all of Aaron Ekblad's minutes all at once. So I think, like, this is a 2-pronged attack, right? You try to get somebody like Goligoski you can play in your bottom pair, and you can play some power play time to eat some of those minutes. And then I think a guy like Dmitry Kulikov making his return to Florida wouldn't be all that strange because they need ironically enough, now that they got rid of him, they need a big checking defensive defenseman, which Aaron Ekblad brought a lot of to the table. But, with a snapped leg, he really isn't helping anybody right now.
Yeah, I think that they're probably, in my opinion, the Florida Panthers are probably the front runner for Dmitry Kulikov just because there's such an obvious gap there. And like you said, you're going to have to replace Aaron Ekblad by committee. There's no one-piece solution to replacing him.
It's not like last year where Pietrangelo was supposedly on the market, which is the only guy you get to replace like somebody like Ekblad.
I mean, we did see there were rumors surrounding Matthias Ekholm on the Nashville Predators.
Until they started winning.
The latest information out of Nashville, and actually, we got some little peek into the Minnesota Wild's operation, something that I'm very pleased to hear. where the Wild said we're not selling the family farm. Yeah, Blake Wheeler's out with concussion syndrome. So,
Oof.
They said that the Wild are say, hey, we're not selling the family farm before the deadline, which I think is a great thing to hear because I was so afraid that they were going to take all this youth and just like dredge it down with awful old people contracts. Like, give me that 35-year-old
Zach
making
Parise contract.
Yeah,
like
give me
Dustin
that.
Brown.
Hey, Islanders, do you want Andrew Ladd to come to the Minnesota Wild again? It's like, what do you mean? It's like, oh, we'll just take him. Like, we don't need to.
The Minnesota Wild.
Yeah.
I mean, even that wouldn't be the worst thing in the world because he's only got 1 year contract. So,
No,
like,
he
if
would be an
nothing else, you
interesting
could just be
pickup.
like,
It's good to see
Bye-bye.
that Bill Guerin isn't like
he's not pulling a Mark Bergevin where he saw all the success the Canadians had last year. And granted, look, it's working out to them, but that's because the division is bad. But it's not like what happened to the Canadians where they saw the success they had last year and they're just like, we're going all in. And it's like, but Carey Price is still 33. Maybe you shouldn't. Like, we're going in. It's like, all right. But
well, I think they're obviously in different situations here. Like I think Mark Bergevin saw like the aging corner. Was like, okay, now I need to give something to get him over the hump. Even though like we both know like they're not getting over the hump with this. Like they didn't do enough to get.
like they might get out of that division, but I don't see them competing with a lot of these other teams.
No, absolutely. They don't have to play Tampa Bay at all this year, and Tampa Bay's in their division normally, and it's a big reason why they don't.
Tampa Bay, Boston,
Toronto,
Florida this year.
I mean, they play Toronto, but like, but yeah, I think it's nice to see that they're actually trying to stand pat and stay the course with their rebuild in Minnesota. But
so let me ask you another team who's kind of been thrown around. I mean, Gallagher's obviously out for the Canadiens now. It seems like this guy hurts his hand every year, and I don't understand how.
he plays
Punching chalkboards.
Well, this time he was like in front of the net and he blocked a shot, and it's like, oof. Like,
I mean, that's just the nature
that's,
of the game, right?
But it's just, there's a couple of teams that I do want to discuss, and I think one of them, there's a couple of bubble teams that could be buyers, could be sellers, and I kind of wanted to talk to you about whether or not they're going to be buyers and sellers. And I know, what Tim and you just echoed, but, where do you guys think the New York Rangers stand at this trade deadline? Are you looking to sell? Are you looking to buy? Are you looking to just stand?
I think you're looking to like stand and make maybe some small moves here and there. Like if you can try to get rid of Tony DeAngelo, if you can, like that's a good move to make at the deadline. But I really don't think
one.
I don't think there's really anything the Rangers need to go out and get, right? Like, what are we going to go out and trade for? Like, a defensive prospect? Like, how many do we have now? We have Keandre Miller who's on the roster. You have Nils Lundqvist. Like, we have guys. And I know, like, rebuilding's a shotgun approach, going out and getting players. But I think we're beyond the point in the rebuild where we're not at the point where the Red Wings are, right? Where they're just trying to acquire as much talent as possible to see what sticks. Like, the Rangers kind of have defined who they're building around and which direction they're going. And I don't really think there's anybody on the market this year that really augments that outside of like Jack Eichel, which I don't think is moving. So I don't really see the Rangers doing much or anything. Risto is nice, but the Rangers need a defenseman that can play matchup minutes, and Risto has proven over his course of his career that he's more of a puck mover and not really big on those heavy matchup minutes. Like when he was playing top pair before they replaced him with Dahlin, he was getting eaten alive in Corsi and expected goals against. I mean, granted the team around him is bad, but his individual stats weren't great either. So, and that's over the course of however long he's been in Buffalo, not just these like 5 years they've been especially bad, So I don't know if the Rangers really need a guy like that because we already have Adam Fox, and Keandre Miller now, who's a big puck mover. Do we need another one? I think we need to be in a market for a guy like Dmitry Kulikov, but he's only a rental, and the Rangers really aren't they're not at the stage yet where they're making trades for rentals. I don't think.
So, if there was a team that came at you with a trade for that kind of defenseman, what kind of pieces do you think you have in excess at this point? I mean, obviously, in my mind, the first thing that comes up is Alexander Georgiev.
That was the first thing that came to my mind.
Georgiev, I think
Georgiev is the first thing that's probably got to go, just because.
I think they're going to hang on to him and do the expansion draft. That's really like how I'm looking at it now, because all indication looks like they're just going to stand pat with him. I mean, Kincaid's been playing, but he's back in the taxi squad because Shesterkin's healthy. So I don't really know what's going to happen with him. But I think like a guy like Julien Gauthier, guys like Phil DiGiuseppe, younger guys who have some projected upside still, might still be in the market to move. And even moving a first round pick wouldn't be that terrible this year, considering how like murky and weird this year's draft is because of how strange all the prospects' playing time has been. I mean, the NCAA played some games, the OHL played some games, but not other games. You know what I mean? So, like, say, like, if Anaheim called us up, like, hey, you want Josh Manson? I think the Rangers would be stupid not to listen. But if they were like, hey, give us, I don't know, like Capo Caco for it, it's like absolutely not. Like, we're not at the point where we're trading blue chip prospects for, older veteran pieces.
So what's the expiration? Because there's an expiration date on Georgiev's time with the Rangers. I mean, it's just he's struggled this year, but he's just
part of the problem is you don't want him to keep playing
poorly.
Yeah, like you don't. So he's almost left off right now. He had a few bad games, but like otherwise he was good. If you watch the tapes, like he didn't really play that bad. The Rangers defense kind of wasn't really all that great at the time. The whole fucking offense was
that like rough stretch
negligible.
That stretch there where Shesterkin went down with that injury and like Kincaid started playing a lot of games. Like it really kneecapped him because I don't think the Rangers. And this is just byproduct of David Quinn himself. I think he's still coaching in a very college-esque fashion, which is I'm going to run hot hands and play guys who've earned it. And it's like, listen, as much as the NHL is a meritocracy and you do have to work hard to earn your ice time, pedigree does earn you some level of playing time. Like, you're a first overall pick, you're not expected to be playing 4 minutes a night through the first 2 periods. Like, it's just... And by extension of that, like, Keith Kincaid playing well really screwed Georgiev because he kept backing Georgiev. Like, Georgiev having to back him up really screwed his value because here's a guy in Keith Kincaid that hasn't been in the league in 2 years and comes in and steals his job from him almost. So, like, I don't know if the Rangers do anything with him just because his perceived value is so much lower now than it was at the last year's draft when they probably should have moved him.
And if to harp back on the tapes, like, if you watch those games, like, Kincaid wasn't playing like excellent or anything. He was playing like Corey Crawford style, bare minimum.
He's also getting better matchups.
That's what I'm saying. Like he wasn't like he made a lot of great saves. I'm not gonna take away from that, but like he wasn't facing a lot of quality shots against, and the shots that were, he went in.
That's really it. Like,
I think the Rangers, if it was me, I think that Shesterkin has proved that when he's healthy, he can carry the team. I mean, that's the other question mark is his health because he's been banged up. His first 2 seasons he's been in New York, he's missed time. I think if the Rangers, honestly, if I was at the helm, I would be moving Georgiev this offseason, if nothing else for the cap, and then signing like a 1B type guy, like seeing if you can get like, I don't know, he's been playing better. I still don't like the guy, but like Jonathan Bernier or like Thomas Greiss out of Detroit. I think Thomas Greiss is like your the perfect match for a guy like Shesterkin because Greiss has proven he can start, he can sit, he can back up. He comes in a Game 7 in the playoffs when he hasn't played yet and gets a shutout. Like, he's the kind of guy you need backing up somebody who's like, Greiss can sit 20 to 30 games and be okay, right? Or he can play 6 games in 10 nights and be fine. And with a goalie like Shesterkin who can run hot but then get hurt, you need a guy like that. And I think Georgiev this season is really kind of showing that he kind of needs that routine, that playing time, that rhythm,
Well, yeah, he needs to play. I mean, he's so used to carrying the load the last so many years with Lundqvist. I mean, he essentially took Lundqvist's job from him before Shesterkin decided to leave the KHL. So, I mean, in his eyes, in all reality, it was his job to lose, and he managed to lose it to Shesterkin and then lose it to Keith Kincaid. So I just think his value's just done nothing but plummet over the last 6 months or so.
Just to touch back on something quick, did you see Greiss get absolutely dusted last night?
In the shootout?
Yeah.
I honestly, I don't know how that counted. I mean, he kept going, but at one point he also like stopped moving. So I don't know. That was a questionable call to me.
That's one of those like he's gliding, he's going, he's kind of gliding, kind of going.
I just think that Shesterkin has shown that he needs that starting time. He needs to play consistently in order to achieve his highest production. He's just that kind of goaltender, and I think that they should move him in the offseason if they can. And try to pick up a cheaper backup, save some money, you save some cap, and you give a guy who, I mean, let's be honest here, he's earned that starting job. Like, he's earned the right to start somewhere. So, again, I don't think he goes to the deadline just because, I mean, goalies almost never go at the deadline.
The last time they did was Ryan Miller was the last big one.
But, I mean, even that being said, like, we've heard some rumors about goalies, like, people that talk about Freddie Anderson going at the trade deadline.
I've heard people say that Philly's in on Freddie Anderson, and I just don't understand why. I know Carter Hart has struggled, but I don't know if that should have counted. Like, he makes the move and then completely stops and then just doesn't do anything. Like
he's gliding at the slowest pace in the world.
Yeah, if I was the ref, I think I would have blown it dead as soon as he made that first move and like almost touched the goaltender and then just completely stopped. Like it looked like he thought he made contact with that goalie and it was going to be waved off and didn't know what to do. And then they were like, "Oh, nope, it's still live." Anyway,
It was iffy, but
Yes.
so here's a team that I think I have a question about. What do you think the Penguins do with the deadline? You think they're looking to add or?
honestly, I think the Penguins made some really good moves this offseason. Well, not this offseason. They've made some interesting moves as of late. I think the Kapanen trade was a really, really good one for them. They get a little younger, they get a little faster. There were rumors that they were in on the goalie market before Jari and DeSmith started to turn it around and come back down to earth, or not come back down to earth, come up from the dirt and go to the level that they should be playing at. Because let's be honest here, they were trash at the start of the year.
Oh yeah.
I mean, they're rumored to be out of the goalie market now, but I don't think they should be buying anything too expensive, to be honest with you, because, look, you can't just look at the standings and be like, oh, well, they're a good team, they need to be buying, right? Like, because,
good hockey, man.
Yeah, like, you can't look at the standings and be like, well, they're tied for first in their division. You have to really look at the makeup of the team and the way that they're playing. Because even though the Penguins have totally kicked the Islanders' ass this year, I don't think...
without Malkin right now, too.
Yeah. Well, I mean, that's another question. Like, Malkin's apparently, like, on the outs for, like, the 17th time in his career. Like, this guy seems to be on the trade block every other year with them.
Well, because every year it's like, he's like, I want to play in front of somebody. I want to play behind Crosby. And then, like, they go on to win a Stanley Cup, and he's like, no, I'm okay. Never mind. Like, I'm okay.
You know what? Playing behind wasn't all too bad.
You know what? Still scored 109 points, won a Hart Trophy.
I just don't think they have the leverage. I mean, what are you trading at this point if you're the Penguins? Like a first-round pick? I mean, that's fine, but you traded for Mike Matheson, so now you're stuck with that awful contract.
I mean, they have some promising young defenders. Like, they have that Joseph kid.
The P.O. Joseph and stuff. I don't think it's worth them. I mean, listen, when you have guys like Crosby and Malkin, of course, you're always trying to win a cup, but, like... being honest with you, I don't think it's worth them going all in to try to win another cup when they're trending in a decent direction with their youth, right? Why would you trade away all this youth that's producing for you right now to fail in the playoffs again? And, I mean, honestly, I think they're playing well enough without a rental that you're at the point where the window's not closed, but it's at the point where if you're running hot, just let them run and see what happens. You know what I'm saying? Like, why go all in when you don't really have that good of a shot? Just let the young kids play, go into the playoffs, and see what happens. Maybe you win a cup, like...
No, I agree.
But I don't think they should be doing another Jason Zucker trade where they dish out a first and a second for another speedy winger,
Yeah, no, I agree.
I could see them maybe going for James Reimer, though.
Maybe. You could just to have... Because, I mean, James Reimer played... They have exceptionally well in the playoffs last year for the Hurricanes.
They have had goaltending problems also.
I don't understand, but here's what I don't get about the Hurricanes. I mean, I know Alex Nedeljkovic is playing pretty well, but Peter Mrazek is so injury prone that, like, do you really want your to throw Alex Nedeljkovic to the Wolves? Like, you can throw James Reimer to the Wolves, like, if Mrazek gets hurt, right? Because, I mean, he's been there, done that. Been in the playoffs his whole career, or not his whole career, but he's been in the playoffs several times. I mean, he's like 28, 29, 30, 31, something like that now. Like, throwing a guy like him in net and being, all right, you're the starter now, like, he's proven he can do it. But do you really want to look at Nedeljkovic and be like, well, if Mrazek gets hurt again, which is pretty likely, you're going to be playing in the playoffs this year? It's like, especially for a team, for a team like the Penguins, that really wouldn't be the end of the world if you throw a young guy in the playoffs, because, like, what do we have to lose?
Yeah.
But the Canes,
the first time they did it.
But the Canes should be competing for a Stanley Cup for every season, realistically, for the next, like, 5 to 7 seasons. Like, they're in that mode now. So why would you jeopardize that,
I agree.
Like, why would you go into the playoffs and be like, well, we don't have a backup plan? Like, if Mrazek busts his head again, well...
I mean, I don't understand why you wouldn't just go out and upgrade goaltending in the free agency where you had, like, 9 options, but that's just me.
I mean, another team that was linked in the goaltending market for this specific reason is the Colorado Avalanche.
Well, yeah, because I can't trust Grubauer not to, like, destroy his groin every playoff. Like,
and they're another team that should be competing every year.
And I wonder if, like, it's just, like, a workload thing, right? Like, I wonder if these guys, because a lot of these guys are going straight from being, like, a backup, playing, like, 25, 30 games maybe, to all of a sudden I'm just at, like, 60 or, like, 55, 60 games a year. And, like, it seems like a lot of times their bodies just can't keep up with it. And I don't know if, like, it's a change in the NHL. We're seeing that, like, we're moving into, like, a more 1A, 1B type thing where you don't have necessarily, like, you have a starter, but you don't necessarily have, like, a goaltender like Marty Brodeur who's starting, like, 77 games or something ridiculous, you know?
I mean, we also see backups, like, getting hurt all the time, too. Like, Jack Campbell's banged up all the time. I think it's just, this season in particular is bad because the games are so compact. Yeah. Whereas, like, last season, you might have a day or two off, like, especially if you're the starter, right? You start a game on Monday, you play another game on Wednesday that you don't play because your backup starts, and you don't play again until Friday, right? So you have Monday to Friday between your starts, whereas now it's, like, back-to-back on Monday, a day off, and then, like, a game Thursday and then Saturday, right?
Yeah.
So I think this season in particular, we're just seeing a lot of guys, like, wear down because 56 games in this compressed schedule, no breaks, no buys, no All-Star week, like...
It's tough.
It's definitely an interesting thing to look at the schedule and, like, realize the impact of injuries, but I think that's going to also drive some GM's decisions. Like, I think that's why we're seeing the backup market heat up so much, and also because I think some teams are trying to, like, prepare ahead of time to have guys under contract for that expansion draft.
Oh, yeah.
Which is right around the corner.
This offseason. Everybody seems to keep forgetting Seattle joins the NHL next year.
Yeah.
Yikes.
And it's flat cap league.
Speaking of another team, though, I guess we'll stick in the East Division that's kind of on that bubble. Should they buy? Should they sell? Like, what are you doing if you're the Philadelphia Flyers at this point? Do you invest in this team, or do you just look at them like you got to play your way out of this funk?
I'm firing Alain Vigneault and hoping that the team is better without him.
That's it. I mean, honestly, that wouldn't be a bad trade deadline trade. Just be like, Alain Vigneault gets fired, and you just put somebody else in the coach.
I mean, I wouldn't mind if they picked up, like, a veteran defender to add to that blue line, because they are relying on a lot of young guys to take big steps. I mean, like, not Shane Gostisbehere, guys like Ivan Provorov and Travis Sanheim, who, I mean, they're like 3-4 seasons deep into their NHL career now, but I mean, you're asking a lot out of guys to shoulder, like, an entire, all those matchup minutes, all those big minutes, where, like, last year when they proved to be, like, the real deal, they had guys like
Matt Niskanen,
Radko Gudas played for them for a couple of years. Guys who've been around the league, they could rely on. They played steady minutes. You knew what you were getting, and I think, like, it can never hurt to add some kind of depth like that at the trade deadline, especially for a team that's in the playoffs. And the Flyers. I mean, they should be in the playoffs, but I mean, like,
they were going to win the division. So
yeah, they've had an absolutely horrific run as of late.
I mean, the defense that we're seeing out of the Flyers is just absolutely horrendous. I mean, there's just no ifs, ands, or buts about it. I don't know what...
Yeah, the Rangers put up an 8 spot all them twice in a week.
I don't know what happened. I mean, they lost... The only big piece I can think that they lost this offseason in particular was Matt Niskanen, but I guess apparently, like, that just throws everything into the monkey wrench. And... I mean, they have some forwards that can play decent defense. Like, obviously, they have Sean Couturier, Selke Trophy winner Sean Couturier. Nolan Patrick was healthy. Like, all signs pointed them to being better this year. And yet,
it didn't work out.
It's not even the goal scoring because they're scoring goals.
I said it just didn't work out. Yeah.
Yeah, like, they just can't keep the puck out of the net.
Well, Carter Hart hasn't been great. And then when he started to play better, the team in front of him started to play worse. So it was like this... They couldn't ever get into rhythm at the same time.
I think a goaltending upgrade is the last thing this team needs, to be quite honest with you.
Oh, yeah, no,
because it's not on the goalies what's been going on. I mean...
No.
I mean, you watch those games against the Rangers, I was talking about, like, the 2 8 spots in a row. I mean, the first 3 goals Carter Hart faced, he had absolutely zero chance on. It was a cross-crease one time or a deflection in front of him and then, like, a broken play that ended up on the other side of the net. Like, how is he supposed to do anything? It's more or less that, like, it looks like Alain Vigneault's system is just breaking down. Like... And we saw it with the Rangers. You know what it does? It looks a lot like the Rangers did towards the end of Vigneault's career, where it looks like the Rangers just running around all the time in the defensive zone. They don't know what to do. And it's like he plays this weird, like, mix of man-zone coverage that, like, changes based on the situation. So, like, depending on where the puck is, depends on whether you're in a zone or a man. And it's like, I think the NHL is, like, just... It's already confusing enough when you're playing a system. Like, you already need to know whether you're manning up or not. Like, so we're seeing that, like, maybe this defensive system just isn't clicking with this team because they're struggling pretty mightily with it. Like, they cannot defend. They're giving up second, third, fourth chances on a lot of these plays. Like, they look awful.
The slot coverage on this team is non-existent.
I mean, the front door to the house is just open all the time.
Not even that. They took the door off the hinges and were like, hey, passes across the slot, one-timers in the slot, breakaways, like, We'll let the goalies figure it out, and then the goalies don't stop the cross crease 2-on-1, and everyone's like, what happens? Like, I don't know, maybe because you have literally 0 orange jerseys anywhere in the house. Like, you have 3 defenders standing up at the blue line, like, looking for a B-way. It's like a 5-on-2 down low. Like, it's just horrendous.
It's pretty trash. Yeah, and I think there's, like, Philly being in the goalie market, I think is, like, also by nature of, like, they're just being, like, the worst goaltending market in all of pro sports, maybe outside of Toronto. Like, yeah. They've been searching for Bernie Parent since he hung the skates up, so, like, they're never happy. I mean, they gave up on Sergei Bobrovsky, who in the first season after they traded him goes on to win a Vezina, so I don't know. Their faith is so shaken in goaltenders, it's ridiculous. Like, Carter Hart had an amazing year, and he's struggling this year. It's like, yeah, guess what? Carter Hart's also only 22 years old. Like, what other 22-year-olds do you know that's coming to the NHL and just dominating every night? Like,
so what are we gonna do about the Blues? The Blues are 16-16-6 and sit 5 points outside the playoffs with a game in hand. So essentially, they could be close to 3 points out of playoffs, but with a -20 in the goal differential column.
They also, I think, play the top. I saw a post. It was the top. They played the top 3 teams in the division, like, the rest of their games this season.
Like the next 24 games.
They played the top. I saw the same thing. I think it was like they play the top 3 teams in the division like 20 out of the next 24 games or something like that.
Something ridiculous. And for that to be, considering that's Colorado and Vegas is 2 of them.
L are the real deal. Yeah.
Minnesota is a toss-up. St. Louis should win that game, but I'll say it's a toss-up every night for how Minnesota's played this season. It's kind of ridiculous, though.
I mean, if it puts it in perspective, they're behind the Coyotes.
I mean,
who are like kind of a dumpster fire of a team right now.
Like, I'm not gonna lie to you. I didn't think the Blues were gonna be all that good this year. I mean, I thought they were gonna be better than this by nature of like their division being dog shit. But like,
well, what's the problem? Like, what's going
on? They're old. I mean, that's really what it is. Like, how long were they competitive for realistically? Right? Like, we were saying they should win a Stanley Cup going back to like what 2011,
2012. I think I said
we were kids.
And
them and Nashville.
And they finally just won. So they finally got over the hump, win that Stanley Cup, right? And now everyone's wondering what happened. It's like, well, your bubble burst. Like, you got your Cinderella run and you won it. Like, you're like the Washington Capitals, except the Washington Capitals seem to have, the difference is the Washington Capitals have 2 franchise players in Nicholas Backstrom and Alex Ovechkin who are literally dragging them, kicking and screaming into relevance until the rest of the team decided to play well.
And then they've had a bunch of different superstars go through the ranks.
And it's like St. Louis here, you have a team this year who's coming off 2 years off their Stanley Cup and losing their captain, which is arguably a top 3 defenseman in the league, probably number 2 to Victor Hedman and Alex Pietrangelo. And I mean, they replaced him with Torrey Krug. Yeah, that's nice. Torrey Krug's a nice addition, but like, I'll put it to like an NHL franchise mode terms, right? You replaced like a 91 overall defenseman with like an 87. It's like, yeah, he's still good, but like there's a really noticeable gap in his skill set compared to Alex Pietrangelo. And on top of that, like guys like Parayko, who've been good but haven't been what they thought. Like they didn't get as much as they thought they were going to get out of him this year. And then you lose Tarasenko for what, like 8 weeks or whatever at the beginning of the year before he came back from shoulder surgery. So there were a lot of things pointing to the St. Louis Blues. Like,
how has he even been doing?
He's been all right.
I think he's got like a couple of goals. I don't think he's like obviously coming back from an injury like that. Like he's not gonna be lighting the league on fire, but he's been doing okay.
I mean, just based on like
I remember hearing about him the first
games.
The other thing is like I said, some of the young guys they're expecting to take big minutes, like Sammy Blais down here, 23 games, 7 points, and a -4. Like that's not what you're expecting out of a guy like Sammy Blais, who is you're essentially hoping to be like your future second line center, like. And the biggest thing is Jordan Binnington has been absolutely awful this year. Despite his numbers still looking kind of okay by league standards, the guy is not good. The guy is mediocre at best. Like, he had a Cinderella run, and last year and this year are just proving that like he's an average goaltender at best.
Tim Thomas syndrome.
Yeah.
I think, the interesting thing is, like, how I've been going to bat for Carter Hart for like the last 2 months when Flyers fans going at his neck, pointing out all the defensive deficiencies, pointing out the slot coverage not being there. Like I can't say the same for Binnington, to be honest with you. I'm seeing a lot of stuff from him that I don't like. He's hugging the post too long. He's getting beat up high off the corner way too much. He's not utilizing his RVH in a proper way. He just looks kind of lost right now. And, I'm not pointing the finger entirely at him, but as opposed to a situation where Carter Hart and Brian Elliott, where you can point to clear defensive breakdowns on like 80% of the goals, I'm just seeing a lot of stuff from Binnington that I'm not liking this year. And I'm not going to put anything on Villahuso because it's not fair to put the blame on him like for anything. Basically, it's like, hey kid,
at 6-5 for a backup, honestly, 6-5, 0-1, I take that every time. That's what you want out of your backup. You want your backup to be winning just about every other game.
The real thing is, like, with the other thing I don't like about Jordan Binnington outside of like his play on the ice has been just like his attitude, the way he's carried this. Like, I understand wanting to be like, I understand that losing is frustrating, especially when your team is supposed to be competing like the St. Louis Blues are. But the reality is, like, hey kid, take a rain check. Like, think about who you are for a second. Like, back up a second. Like, yeah, you're a Stanley Cup champion and you won a Stanley Cup in your rookie year. You are a 26-year-old rookie who was 4th on the depth chart, who by some God-given miracle made it onto an NHL squad and won a Stanley Cup. Stop acting like an entitled little baby every time a team comes out and shells you, and start trying to fight guys who literally have nothing to do with you, and trying to hit guys with your stick and bitch and moan and act like a baby. Like, people act like oh, he's a leader. Is he really a leader? Like, he's acting like an entitled child. Like,
there's a difference between even if he
would have just get up and actually like punched a guy in the head and started swinging, like, all right.
Yeah, even like if you like, let's say you go up and you do you cheap shot someone, but you go to get a rat like Marchand, you get someone who hits someone in the game, you maybe go find someone to get something going.
Or like even when you're still in the game before they pull you, like when you're still in the battle and like you're engaged, like after a whistle you grab a hold of a guy and you rough him up a little bit and your team has to come in and bail you out, but like you get everybody back in the game because it's like you're pulling in the same direction now. Instead, you wait till you get tossed because you're playing like dog doo-doo and the team isn't playing well, and then you make a scene and embarrass literally everybody on the ice because now they have to go to bat for you when you're running around swinging your stick at guys like an idiot.
Even if there's a guy in your crease maybe, and you let's say he's having a rough game. He knows he's going to get pulled. There's a guy in his crease. He's slashing away at him. Give him some business. Yeah, exactly. Go to town.
Exactly.
Have a little Donnie.
Do it while you're in the game and guys can, like, you're in the game still, like, and guys know you're still engaged and you're not just getting shelled, you know? This way they know you still care. When he goes off on the ice like that, it looks like you don't care because now you're making a big scene. You're making it all about you. It's like, oh, here I go on my big skate. What is essentially the walk of shame across the ice to the runway. He's out here, like, chopping at Erik Karlsson, trying to fight Devin Dubnyk, who has absolutely nothing to do with him, who, like, was actually looking like he was about it and then running away from him. Like,
I think the biggest issue is that not only is he, like, everything you guys said, I think, is a fair assessment. But you guys were saying, hey, yeah, slash this guy, hit this guy. I think the biggest difference is that he's not doing any of that. He's just pretending to.
Well, no, like, that's we're saying if he was doing those things, it would be okay.
That's my main issue, where he's like fake punching people and then skating away. It's like, really, like I'll give you, if you're gonna get into a fight, get into a fight.
Yeah, it's like Patrick Waugh, right? Like look at Patrick Waugh. Like, yeah, he went out there and some nights he got absolutely shelled, but when Patty Waugh went after somebody, he went at them, and like guys loved that about him because it was a rallying thing. It's like, oh, if Patrick's gonna go out there, like, if our goalie's gonna go out there swinging and fighting, like, we have to do something, right? Like, we have to go to bat for him.
Swing and fight.
Well, that's like
the team has to fight.
Well, it's kind of like it's a mentality thing, right?
Like Billy Smith used to slash everyone in his crease, but if they wanted the smoke, like, he'd give them the smoke. He fought Lanny McDonald. How many times?
Battling
like,
Billy Smith. I mean, that was his thing, you know.
Like,
but it's just like
Binnington being like, oh, I'm gonna get you. It's like,
it's just like you're gonna like. It's also like guys are more willing to go to bat for you if you go out there and you actually just start swinging, because, like I said, like now they're looking at it like, oh well, I guess like if he still cares and it's 6-0, like, then I guess the least we could do is go out there and at least make it like play for him, you know. And Jordan Binnington said, it's like why would I want to play for a guy who's acting like that? Like what in the world makes me want to be like, oh well, yeah, that's something I want to like really support.
That's my leader, the guy who's running around and like swinging his stick.
And like I'm not trying to take anything from the rest of the like the rest of the Blues have been okay. I mean, like Braden Schen's had a decent season. I mean, a lot of the guys have been okay. I mean, Ryan O'Reilly, you know what you're getting, but
Troy Cruz had a decent season. Like he's not filling Petrangelo's role, but he's had a decent season.
Oh yeah, no, he was the best option for them in free agency to replace Petro, and like they did an excellent job of jumping on him as soon as they could. I mean,
do you think that maybe some of this has to do with the fact that maybe the coaches that, because you give Craig Berube the first year, right, when he comes in and wins the cup, because it's a new coach, you're motivated to play for a new coach. Second year, you have that sophomore surge, right? You're still motivated. He's still really a new coach because you only play with him half the season. Now you're starting to see it settle in. Now the team's like, all right, they feel comfortable under Berube. They know what they're getting out of him. Do you think that maybe that has to do with anything?
I'll put it to you this way. Do you remember Craig Berube's last coaching stint?
No.
Philadelphia Flyers, 2011 to 2013. Do you know what happened in those 2 years?
Nothing good.
They made the playoffs once and lost to the Rangers in 7 games on their way to a Stanley Cup final. So his track record isn't great. I mean, yeah, I think he's one of those guys, like, I don't know if you remember what's his name. He had a mustache. Oh my God, he's from like the 80s and 90s. He was a big asshole and everybody hated him, but he used to win. He used to win all the time. He coached Toronto for so many years. Big bald spot on his head. But whatever. Like, he was a guy like. I'm wondering, Craig Brewer is one of those guys. Like, we talked about it briefly in a podcast before. It's kind of like a John Tortorella. You bring him in for a group to like shake, kick them into shape, and then just push them. Like, guy like that's good for a team. Like,
you need to light a fire under their ass.
Yeah, like he was good for that veteran team right then in that moment, because like he essentially brought them along and said like, hey guys, like we're in last place. Like, how much worse can it really get, right?
Is any of those guys?
Pat Burns. That's exactly what I was thinking of. I could see his face. Yeah, Pat Burns.
Stupid face.
It's like Mike Keenan, even like guys like that who only like they coached a lot of teams over their careers. Like Mike Keenan was in St. Louis, then he was a Ranger, then he was out west somewhere, and like it's one of those, he's like, I feel like Craig Brewer is one of those guys where like he's only got a couple of really 2-3 years behind a bench before like it all goes to pot. Like, and I mean St. Louis has had a real rough coaching run the last so many years. I don't know if you guys remember. I mean, like they had what's his name, the fat guy, Ken Hitchcock. I mean, how is you going to describe Ken Hitchcock? The guy's like 5 foot. The guy's like 5'9" and like 310 pounds. Like, he's literally a meatball. I don't think he ever put on a pair of skates in his life.
That's pretty fair.
I don't care if he hears this. Like, it's totally true. Like, players that played for him hate the guy. People in the media
meatball, come down to my deli shop. I'll hit you with the goddamn semolina bread.
Bro, honestly, he looks like he's a little too familiar with the semolina bread. But yeah, so like they go from Ken Hitchcock, arguably like outside of making fun of his, obesity, like he's actually a fantastic coach, one of the winningest coaches of all time. And then you go to Mike Yeo, who I don't know why you would hire Mike Yeo after his tenure in Minnesota, which was absolutely a train wreck. Like, he took a Minnesota team that should have been competitive and just one big L.
One big fat L.
So, and then you go to Craig Berube, and Craig Berube wins you a Stanley Cup, but I mean, they've been kind of lackluster every season since. Is it worth holding on to him because he got you that Stanley Cup, or do you just kind of like be like, hey, thanks for the Stanley Cup, and then just jettison him to like whatever and just go a different direction? Because I think that's really where they're at. It's a fork in the road. Like, do you try to retool now and get a little younger because guys aren't as old, and you have a chance now because realistically that core broke up. Like, as soon as Petro walked out the door, the Stanley Cup winning core is pretty much gone.
After I watched the Penguins fire Pete DeBoer. I mean, not Pete DeBoer. What's his name? Is it Pete DeBoer?
No. Oh, I know what you're talking about. The guy with the glasses.
Yes.
Oh, the one from 2009, Dan Bilesma.
If they can fire Dan Bilesma like they did when he was as good as he was at the top of his game because they had a bad season, I fully think that every team should consider firing their coach when it stops working and it's a clear breakdown in the system.
I mean, the Rangers did it with going from John Tortorella to AV. They saw very clearly that like John Tortorella just wasn't reaching the group anymore, and they went with a different coach in a different direction. They retooled a little bit, and look where it got them: a Stanley Cup final and an Eastern Conference final, President's Trophy.
Florida has Joel Quenneville now.
Yeah, and after one whole year of learning Coach Quenneville's system, this team has become absolutely amazing, and it helps.
I love to see it.
I mean, I was always rooting for Coach Q. I mean, you guys know I've been rooting for Florida for years now. Like, I've been saying like Huberdeau and Barkov deserve more than they've gotten, and it's nice to see that like they've actually invested in a coach who can win them games, And I guess that's what I'm saying with St. Louis is like they need to really take stock of what they're looking at here and see if maybe the coach isn't the right answer, or maybe it was kind of just like a fluke one-off, because everything went right for them that offseason. Literally everything. So maybe it's time to just look at it and be like, okay, well, we got a fantasy run out, and maybe we should be realistic and try to find something else.
So are you saying that the Blues are another team that their trade deadline acquisition should just be take the L on the season and get a new coach?
I think they should try to move some older guys if they can too. I mean, there's some pieces here. I mean, Vince Dunn is a guy that people have been talking about moving just because Vince Dunn's younger and his contract is coming up, so they're not sure if the St. Louis Blues can pay him or not. And so like the Rangers and Montreal have been in talks with guys like Vince Dunn and stuff like that. Or yeah, Vince Dunn is the one that's still there. Joel Edmondson's the one that's in Montreal now.
Yeah.
I always confuse the two of them for some reason because they were so similar. But so I think like there's some room for them to do something. But I really think if I'm the St. Louis Blues, I'm looking towards this draft. I'm looking to just try to maybe finish this season, take a lottery pick if I can, and then just retool from there and see what I get. I mean, there's nothing wrong with having a couple, like 1 or 2 off years and being semi-competitive, and then going back into being competitive. Because realistically, what do you stand to gain if you're St. Louis this year and you trade on some rentals and you bring in some guys, some older guys, and you get eliminated in the first round, but you say, oh hey, we made the playoffs. It's the Detroit argument. I mean, it's what Detroit did for, however many years after Steve Yzerman left. And realistically, it's what they did for the first 3 years of the 2010s when it was all but clear that they should have just retooled.
They just did what the Yankees have done their whole life. Make the playoffs, say, we lost in the first round this time. Next year's the NLCS Conference Finals.
Yeah, pretty much.
So, speaking of another team that has had their fair share of coaching controversy that has been linked in a lot of trade rumors, the Columbus Blue Jackets.
Oof.
So, Chicago, this was tweeted on March 28th from Justin Bourne after they lost 3-1 and 4-1 to Detroit. They then have to play Tampa, Florida, Tampa after those games.
Sorry.
And they've been linked with the Islanders with Nick Foligno. They've been linked with other teams with regards to Elvis Merzlikins.
I've heard some long shots. Even Seth Jones might be like on the move because his contract is up next year.
What are we? If you're the GM right now, what are you doing? Because I see literally 0% chance that both Laine and Tortorella are on this team next year. I cannot see it happening.
I'm sorry, Tim. I was just saying, I'm the GM, Tortorella. I'm gonna give Tortorella the rest of the season, but like he's gone. He's all but gone.
It really just comes down to that, like, what side are you taking? Are you? And I think that Tortorella should just go, personally, because the team is also just not playing well. Like, ignoring that Patrick Laine isn't doing well. Let's say you got rid of Laine and you put someone, I don't know, who else are you gonna put? Let's say you get Jack Eichel on this team. The rest of your team still isn't playing well.
And the other thing is, like, Coach John Tortorella is shown to be, like, through his career mostly, like, not even just his tenure in Columbus or with the Rangers, he's shown to be, like, a star killer. He does not like talented, like, high-end players because they don't, quote-unquote, work hard enough for him. And, I mean, you saw with Patrick Laine in that first post-game interview with him after he benched him, he literally says, well, after I scored that first goal, I thought, they got a couple of goals on us, but I thought I was playing well. Evidently, I was wrong. And it's like, when you don't have like a communication between your coach and your players, and like there's a disconnect that wide, I really think it's time to move on. Because like if it almost seems like Laine doesn't know what his own coach is asking from him. You know what I mean? Like, what does he want from him? Laine went out and scored 2 goals, but he got scored on a couple of times, so he got benched. It's like, yeah, but you're paying him to put the puck in the net.
I didn't even think the goals were his fault either. Like,
no,
the one goal was arguably his fault because he had a bad change, but
the other one, the puck was hopping and rolling on him, and he missed it. Like, what are you gonna do on that? That's like, it happens. The puck, it's a rubber puck. It bounces and rolls. Like,
so one of the interesting things to me specifically is the situation with Jack Roslovic here, because I mean we saw that. I mean, let's be honest here. Like, Max Domi has not worked out.
He flopped. Yeah,
he flopped really hard, which was disappointing because I had really high hopes for him. And Jack Roslovic had 24. He has 24 points in 33 games, and he was scratched the last 2 games.
Part of the problem is how do you know who's flopped on this team? How do you know who's banged up? How do you know who's bad at this point?
Well, the real thing is, like, who is Max Domi's not a guy that creates offense on his own, and he's shown that through his career. He's not a guy that can thrive in like a one-person offense, right? He's not Jack Eichel. He's not Connor McDavid. He's not of that level. And that's fine. There's nothing wrong with that. But when you send him to a team like Columbus, where realistically he's not playing with any high-end talent, the only high-end talent he had was Pierre-Luc Dubois, and then you trade that out for Patrick Laine. What else has he got? Like, it's a guy like you've said Max Domi's essentially been put in a position to fail, and that's a whole other argument for a different day. But like, the basic argument is he flopped. And then Jack Roslovic, who's been great for them, gets benched or scratched. Like, even if he has a couple bad games, like, can you really afford to scratch a guy like Jack Roslovic? Because who are you putting in instead of him? Liam Foudy? Like, I know Liam Foudy's a good young player, but, like, realistically, like, is he going to give you any more than Jack Roslovic, who's got 24 points through 33 games? I mean, yeah, he's a -7, but the whole team's a minus, so I don't really take that into account, you know?
And not even that, he's only -7. Like, it's not even that bad. Like, at 24 points, he's on the ice for 31 against. Like,
that's not bad at all. Like,
and
he's averaging decent time on ice too.
Yeah, like, I'm not even. I don't know what to say about this team because there's just.
I think we're all in the same kind of spot.
There's just
right?
like one solution, and it's just like get rid of the coach.
Well, there's two solutions, and it's just which problem do you want, or what do you think the bigger problem is as like the GM? And
well, there's two, like you said, there's two options, right? They're another team at a fork in the road, right? And the two options are build a team in John Tortorella's image, which is a far longer process. It would probably take them far longer to accomplish now than they would if they were to just dump him and continue building the direction that they are, which is to be a more speedy offensive team, which isn't necessarily in Tortorella's wheelhouse, and it never has been, and that's okay. So I think like them sticking with him is either going to handicap them and really screw them, and it might cost Jarmo Kekalainen his job if he decides to stick with him. Because listen, if you lose out on both Pierre-Luc Dubois, number 3 overall pick that you made, and trade him for the number 2 overall pick, and then lose him too, you don't keep your job. There's no way you keep your job. It's the coach or the general manager, right?
You know, because you've lost too much value.
That's it, right?
Like if we gave like these players like numerical values for like how much they were in like a season, like for how much they cost that season for the team, it's unprecedented how, like what you have to replace them with.
It's also just like expected points and like I know those stupid fancy stats like expected goals for and stuff. It's just like if you look at those numbers, like how much better off is your team going to be scoring if you remove Jack Eichel, if you remove Jack Roslovic or Pierre-Luc Dubois or Patrick Laine from the scenario, and like you look at the team and it's like he's running the only weapons he has out of town, and I don't get why he's so hell-bent on. I mean, he's even driving guys he likes out of town. Like Seth Jones might be on the way out. Zach Werenski might be on the way out because they can't afford to pay these guys. Cam Atkins is an interesting one just because his production is so like bleh compared to like those couple of seasons he had, and he signed that big contract that like they're kind of just stuck with him now. He's like Johnny Gaudreau a lot. He reminds me a lot of Johnny Gaudreau, except that Johnny Gaudreau is surrounded with like actual high-end talent and continues to produce, quote unquote.
I think Gaudreau's an interesting case, but I don't really want to harp on that.
Yeah, I mean he also might be on the move too. I heard.
Yeah, him,
Monahan, Matt Tkachuk, I heard might be available for some. Can we talk? Why did they hire Sutter? Like they literally like they went from having a coach to firing him and giving him a 4-year contract all in the same day, like out of nowhere.
I just don't think that Sutter like fits the mold of this team. I mean, I think the issue is right. Like they saw what Sutter was able to do with the LA Kings, right? Where the LA Kings and the Flames, they have a fairly similar build because those Stanley Cup winning LA Kings, they had the one, elite center, right? Which I think you could make a strong argument for Matthew Tkachuk
or Sean Monahan.
Well, he's playing on a wing a lot, but you could make a strong argument for Matthew Tkachuk being that elite two-way player that Anze Kopitar was. Not on the same level just yet, but he fits that same mold. Then you have a couple of big power forwards like Dylan Dubé and Sean Monahan is, he's more of a two-way player. Could be a power forward.
Mangiapane is pretty.
You have that veteran defenseman like Mark Giordano, right? They don't have they don't have a Jonathan Quick, but they have decent goaltending in Jacob Markstrom. So like the molds of the team are fairly similar. Not a whole lot of depth on the wings, some decent depth in the defense, but I just don't. They're not the same kind of defensive team that LA was. Like LA was the best defensive team in the league for like 4 or 5 years, right?
Oh yeah.
Calgary is just not there. When you look at the depth on that defense, think about the players that the LA Kings had on their fourth line pair or their third line defensive pair. They had guys like Rob Scuderi and like Alec Martinez for a while,
Mitchell,
right?
Yeah.
Whereas like who's on the Flames fourth and third line pair? Like, could you name them?
Probably not.
Like
I know Shillington's playing on one of their pairings somewhere.
That's what I'm saying. Like you can't, there's just no real.
Well, it doesn't help that they lost what's his name to the guy that always TJ Brody lost Brody to Toronto. Like that doesn't help. but
I don't know. The Flames are another team that's on the bubble that has been talked about in the trade deadline. I mean, I guess,
I just don't know like what they need. Like it's every year with them.
They need wingers. I mean, I don't want to trash talk like Andrew Mangiapane or Dylan Dubé, but let's be honest here, they're not second line players. They're just not. I think they're really good third line players. I think Mangiapane reminds me a lot of like an Andrew Cogliano, and Dylan Dubé's had a lot like a young Milan Lucic, but they're not getting scoring because you can't have those two guys on your second line and wonder what's happening.
Yeah, it's true.
Like,
I mean, the big name out of Calgary is Sam Bennett, like everyone's talking about, and that's just because another guy.
Apparently, the old coach hated him. Apparently, he really likes Sutter, so we'll see.
I mean, that's a guy I would like to see the Rangers take a chance on. I mean, he was a number 5 overall pick. I mean, he has talent, so like, what's the worst that he's not making a lot of money. It's only like getting 3.5.
He's the kind of player the Rangers need. Like they need a little bit of bite.
Yeah, and I mean, like his play if you look at his point production goes up in the playoffs. He's actually a more productive player when the playoffs start than he is in the regular season, and it's actually kind of ridiculous. And I think like a guy like that would be nice for the Rangers. Like a lot of teams actually be probably pretty happy with a guy like that. I mean, as a number 3 center, he goes out there, he takes tough matchups, he plays some penalty kill, he goes out there and grinds down the other team, and you can count on him to produce in the playoffs.
One thing I'd like to ask about is what is Dallas doing, and what are they gonna do? Is Dallas so they have 3 games in hand, and that division is so tight in points that they could make the playoffs. They're still in the race completely.
Yeah.
At 3 games out.
My issue with Dallas is, listen, they're missing Tyler Seguin, and that's a big piece. I'm not going to take that away from them.
Look how far they're at 36 points, though. They're at 7th. What are they at in the whole league? What are they probably at? Like somewhere like 27, 26?
I mean,
so
they're only.
Do you risk? Do you kind of just maybe chuck it in and hope for that good draft pick?
Yeah, I
and
think you just take a mulligan if you're the Dallas Stars.
I think that they were kind of just plagued by a really rough start with COVID, and Khudobin being constantly out with either injury or COVID problems.
The Ben Bishop being out too.
Ben Bishop also being out.
Like they came out of the gate hot after missing the start of the season. Like they were first in this division for a while, but then they just like settled back in, and like at one point they were like 9-9-1, like the definition of mediocrity. They're 13-14-10, like the definition of mediocrity. Like they realistically only have 26 points out of wins. They have 10 overtime or shootout losses.
They went on 2 COVID breaks though, they had 2 lapse. They had a bunch of lapse in games is the big issue.
They got some games postponed from other teams
because they came out hot, like you said, and then they got stopped again. And after because they came out and they won the first game, like they win 8-1, something like that.
Yeah,
they blew them out.
Joe Pavelski had like a huge night.
Yeah, they blew, and then they went on another break, and then they came back and they slowed down, and then they just disappeared, and just faded away. I think that you at this point you kind of just say, look, this wasn't our year, right?
I kind of agree, because here's the situation, right? Like obviously you're missing Tyler Seguin, and that's a big loss. We can't take that away from anybody.
Radulov also has actually been out in and out.
They don't have Tyler Seguin from the hip surgery. Listen, you take a first line winger off of any team, it's gonna hurt you.
Oh yeah. I mean, a couple of that with Jamie Benn's like slow regression. I mean,
the thing is, you just look at this team, and when you're behind a team like the Blackhawks, who didn't have Jonathan Toews and didn't have Kirby Dach the entire season, how can you realistically look at yourself and think that you're going to compete? I mean, there's no chance that this team can compete with Tampa Bay. There's no chance this team can compete with Carolina. The only hope they have against Florida is that they don't trade for a defenseman and Bob regresses to what he was last year. So that, I would say, is like you have maybe a 30% chance against the Panthers, but they have no shot against these other teams.
I mean, they're behind the Columbus Blue Jackets, who we were just talking about as being like a dumpster fire.
But like I said, they do have a few games in hand. They could jump up to.
They just can't.
If they win all 3 of these games, they can jump up to that 5th spot.
I mean, they just can't score is the issue. Like, if you look, they have goals against is only 99, which is pretty solid. And then you look at their goals for, and it's only 100. Like, they can't score to save their
whole
life.
offense is Rupe Hintz, the one kid, I can't remember his name, the rookie.
Oh, is it Dennis Gurianov?
Yeah.
He's a sophomore now, I think.
Yeah.
I think he's technically a sophomore.
Bro, but like
Okay.
it's even like
Gurianov,
to your point, like mediocre across the board. They're 500 at home essentially, 500 on the road, and they've lost 5 in a shootout, bro. Like how? 3-4-3 in your last 10, like.
They were expecting Heiskanen to take a big step this year, and he's struggled in his sophomore season or his
third season.
They've had some injuries, they've had some COVID issues, but I mean, even Jake Ottinger coming in for Ben Bishop. I mean, Jake Ottinger's been fantastic for them. He's had a really good season. They just to fix their issues, and they've actually been linked to Taylor Hall because of the scoring problem. That's the kind of player that this team would need.
Yeah.
Or what Taylor Hall should be.
Well,
Because we always talk about how he's really not what everyone thinks he is, but the kind of player Taylor Hall perceives himself to be is the kind of player that the Dallas Stars need.
Like we say, perceives himself to be as if he like sells this.
I mean, he's
like,
only scored like 2
I'm
goals.
saying, like, I just imagine him walking in the GM office. Hey, you listen here, Bob. I'll give you this deal right now.
I was a first overall pick.
40 goal scorer. Never. Prospected 40 goal scorer every
Always.
season.
Yeah, at least Jeff Skinner hit 40 goals once, right?
Twice.
Like, I don't know. I mean, I guess, we'll start to kind of wind it down since we're getting up to the hour mark here. Like, the biggest question, right, the one I want to kind of leave off with, the end-all, be-all that is on everyone's mind, is where does Taylor Hall end up and what's the return on him? Like, if you had to stake your claim on where this guy goes and what is coming back, you don't have to be specific, you don't have to like certain players, but like the kind of players at least, and like the picks that are coming at him.
Can you pull up that cap from again?
I really think a team like, Colorado wouldn't be a terrible idea to try to solidify some depth goal scoring for Burakovsky.
To give you like some ideas, he's been linked to Edmonton, he's been linked to the Islanders, he's been linked to the Stars, and I think the Bruins.
I've also seen Toronto, but that's just
because Toronto.
Farce.
Yeah, Toronto's in on like every like guy that hits the market like this. But he realistically, like, from again the perception of Taylor Hall.
I could see him going to Nashville.
Nashville would be interesting. I mean, it would help their scoring problem, but like they're already in cap hell because like with the Johansson contract and Matt Duchene and everything. I really think like Taylor Hall, like what he represents, would be perfect for the Islanders. Like the perfect trigger man, like goal scorer, pure through and through. But like we all know he's not that guy, and I don't think the Islanders are willing to like sell to try and buy him at the price that Buffalo is willing to try to sell him at. Especially because like Lou Lamoriello could really look at, I don't even know the GM in Buffalo because they change so often. You can look him in the face and be like, all right, well, screw you, buddy. You want all these picks? I'll just wait till July 1st when he's a free agent.
They've also been more closely linked with Palmieri because he's more the type of player that Anders Lee was, right? Like we're looking to, everyone's saying they're looking to replace on. Like I'm not gonna lie, I wouldn't mind taking Taylor Hall on a 1-year contract like he's on. If we're getting him for a decent price, like people are saying, like, oh, it's gonna cost down as like Kiefer Bellows, like I'm not doing that.
Yeah,
like,
that's
no way.
I'm gonna put my money on that Carolina one though.
So what's coming back from Carolina?
I think they're gonna give a pick, probably 2 picks, probably a first round, probably a first, a third, and maybe a prospect.
All right, so Tim is
maybe that kid from last year that they drafted. I can't remember his name.
Was it Dominic Bach or whatever?
No, it's like it's like a Sammy or something like that. It's like a double letter name.
Let's see. I'll pull up the 2020 NHL entry draft.
See, if I'm like, Edmonton would be like a perfect place for him to go. The real thing is just like, what can Edmonton?
Seth Jarvis.
Mm-hmm.
What could Edmonton?
Yeah,
really
I could see
give
them
him?
trading Seth Jarvis, a first, and like maybe a prospect or something, or maybe another pick, like a third.
See, like I said, I really like the idea of Taylor Hall to Edmonton because it turns them into less of a helicopter. Like they're more symmetrical.
Do you say Taylor Hall back to Edmonton?
Yeah. I mean, that's what they're linked to.
talking about,
I know.
right?
I just like that.
They're linked. They're looking to.
They
sign
were just
him.
so hell bent on getting him out of Edmonton in the first place.
Do you know what's funny about that more than anything though, is the fact that I think that the reason he didn't have a successful career is because of Edmonton. I think Edmonton drove him out. Like they drove him out when he was at his peak, stunted his actual cap growth, like his ceiling, and just kind of kicked him to like they're like, hey, we have the actual best player in the world. You're trash. Get out of here. And it's like, how do you do that to your your other first pick?
It really was like it's the same thing that like a lot of people were doing to Lafreniere this year, which is like they were just expecting so much out of Taylor Hall right away. Like they were expecting him to walk into the league and be like, and I'm putting up 120 points. And it's like, yeah, he's not Connor McDavid, bro. Like
the sad part was like he came into the league and he played so well. And what's funny is they drove out what's his name, Yakupov. Yakupov did the same thing to him.
Yakupov killed himself.
Yakupov was his first season was good. His second season was good. His third season was terrible.
His attitude, I think, is what killed him ultimately.
And I think that has to do with the fact that you keep bringing these superstars in, and how can you you pick a kid first overall, you say, yo, you're going to be our next Gretzky, and then the next season you're like, we have someone who might be the actual next Gretzky. How do you expect them to excel in that mindset, especially in like such a directly competitive sport like hockey? I get that it's a team mentality, but you're taking these a first overall pick is someone who's not your first 5 picks in the NHL draft are not normal kids by any means of like a mindset. They have that cadet mentality that we speak of all the time, where it's, I'm the best. This is like, I'm here to win. This is like my league. This is my team.
Well, they've been bred like that's just kind of like the mindset they've been given their whole lives.
Yeah, like you're the best at one of the hardest leagues to be the best in. To be first overall in the NHL draft is an insane accomplishment, and to go like Yakupov did with the hype around him, and then to be shit on like he was because Nugent Hopkins and Taylor Hall just blew him out of the water. Which, yeah, they just blew him out of the water. Like, what were you supposed to do?
I agree with you in general. I think I disagree with you specifically about Yakupov.
That's fair.
But in general, I agree with what you're saying.
And I understand that because I think Yakupov also it was kind of like a schmuck, but
Brian Burke said in their draft interview because I think Burke and the Leafs had like the 4th or 5th pick that year. He said that Yakupov was insulted that they interviewed him, and one of your Burke's scouts almost fought him during the interview.
Well, that's what I'm saying. Like he had that mentality of I'm the best.
Yeah, he was an egomaniac. So all right, so Tim's claiming Carolina. Who do you think Taylor Hall's going to? What's the return we're getting out of him? Because I think that's like he's obviously the big fish in play, and I think that there's like a 99% chance that he goes out of Buffalo, if nothing else, just so the GM could be like, well, we got something out of him.
He is this year's Matt Duchene or Bobby Ryan out there.
Pretty much. I mean, I could see Dallas making a move for him and like trading a guy like Esa Lindell maybe to like to Buffalo because they're looking to bulk up on their back end. I mean, there's some pieces here. I mean, like Toronto, like they could trade him to Edmonton. Edmonton's got Philip Broberg. They could trade. They got
Mike Smith.
Even what's his name? The other defenseman, Clefbaum, if they really wanted to trade him. Like, they have options that they can get in return. It's just, like, I just don't know what team really would be willing to pay such a package for a guy who's only got 2 goals. Like, you're paying for his reputation. Like, I don't get it.
This is going to sound kind of crazy. I could honestly see the Blackhawks, like, because they have $22 million in cap, just being like, hey. Like,
you also have to take away, like, what is it, 8 or 9 of that, though, for JT if he comes back?
He's done for the year, I think.
I'm saying, though, like, okay, that's fair.
I mean, even though like, they could still afford that, though.
Yeah.
I could see them, like, if, like, it's, like, you know, like 2 p.m. and the Sabres haven't come up with a trade, I could see the GM of the Blackhawks being like, I'm going to give you a second and a first one.
Like, real shit posting them? Like, hey, what do you think about this?
Like, I'll give you a second, a third, and like a top grade prospect. They're like done.
In theory, the potential of Taylor Hall is probably worth your first overall pick this year, unless you're getting like a top 10 pick.
Unless you're getting like Luke Hughes.
That's exactly like a top 10. Because he probably has like the same potential cap for them.
Oh yeah.
I'm gonna stake my claim that Taylor Hall ends up on. I'm gonna say.
Did you say, by the way?
I'm stuck between Dallas and what was the other one?
I'm gonna go
Edmonton.
off the books. I'm gonna say a team that like hasn't been talked about with him, like really at all.
Toronto.
I'm gonna say he ends up on the Jets with the news of Blake Wheeler going out for the year.
I think the Jets need defense, though, is the issue.
They do.
So
They absolutely do.
That's why I kind of disagree with you, but that's an interesting one.
But I'm going to say, because just like literally as we sat down and started doing this podcast, we saw the news about Blake Wheeler with his concussion.
I got Dallas picked, though. I think that's an interesting one.
I think Dallas is definitely more realistic.
I
think there's
Boston
literally
are
like
both
less
really
than
interesting ones.
I think there's like less than a 0% chance that Taylor Hall actually ends up on the Jets. But I'm gonna go out on a limb. I'm gonna say he ends up on the Jets this year.
You know, maybe Boston, though.
I mean, Boston could give them like what's the hell's his name? Jake DeBrusque. They have pieces they could give him for him, but it's like, again, like if I'm Don Sweeney, am I really gonna sell like a 23-year-old Jake DeBrusque who's still got some years ahead of him to really prove himself to a guy Taylor Hall who's
I don't think so. After moving Chara away, I don't really see them looking to add. Like, I think getting rid of Chara was them saying, "All right, get out of here, old man."
Yeah.
I'm gonna give the Jets. I'm gonna say his value goes down. I'm gonna say they lowball him. They play hard to get towards the end of the trade deadline. I'm gonna say the Jets get away with just a first and a pick, a first and a prospect.
Wow.
I think that teams are gonna play hard to get with the Sabres because they're gonna be like, listen, I can just sign him in the offseason, and it's a flat cap, so like, you know.
Yeah.
So who do you got, Speed? You're the last one, your kid.
I think I'm just gonna stick with Dallas. Yeah. So I think Dallas just has the most to offer, and they have the most to gain by getting him. I mean, like
Dallas is a good one.
Like I said, they're 3 games back, and they're only 5 points out. Like realistically, with Taylor Hall, they could have a late season.
And there's
surge.
a clear need for him.
If they're gonna shoot for that playoff run, I think that they shoot for him.
Yeah, you shoot for the moon, right? Like if he's out there, grab him.
GM me to the moon.
Also, like he's one of those players that, realistically speaking, there's a hole in his team that they need somebody like him. Like they've needed somebody like him for a while, so like he could stick around. I don't know if they can fit him under the cap.
It'd be. I mean, he'd be a nice second line option when your top line is Radulov, Ben, and Sagan when they're all healthy, and then you could throw Taylor Hall,
Pavelski, and Gurianov.
Yeah, like that's a really lethal top 6, and then your third line has
Rupe Hintz,
who is a number 2 center.
Not Jason Robertson. I can see his face, but
Nick Robertson, I think it is
something like that. But
well, it's the brother of the one from Toronto, I think.
So yeah, anything else you guys want to touch on last second before we?
I would like to update something from a few podcasts ago. When we were doing our midway points, I forgot to actually give my real Bum of the Year award to Shea Weber. He's my honorary Bum of Forever. Shea Weber forever.
Shea Weber?
Bum forever.
Forever. Anything else you got, Steve, or are you good to wrap up?
That's pretty much it. I don't think there's really anything else going on.
All right, so I just want to thank everyone for watching. I want to remind you guys that we are now on multiple streaming platforms. We are on Google Podcasts. We are on Spotify. We're on a bunch of other ones, like other ones that I don't really have ever really heard of, like Breaker and stuff like that. All those links will be down in the description. We're still working on Apple Podcasts. They're kind of picky about what they let on, so
need to hit up our boy about that connect.
Yeah, so we're still working on Apple Podcasts because they have very specific guidelines about what gets on. Like, it needs to be super, like, unique or whatever. So we're working on that, but check down in the description. The links will be down there for the Spotify, the Google Podcast, and all the rest of them. So be sure to follow us at your favorite streaming service. As always, we will always be posting these to YouTube as well. They go up at roughly the same time each time. Like, I don't, like, put out the... Some people do, like, the streaming services go up like a week before the YouTube one. I do it at the same time, so stay tuned to the YouTube channel for the other mini pods, stuff like that. Those are YouTube exclusive, and any other, like, short format content. But anything else? Yeah, so just follow us on your favorite streaming platforms. Let us know if you have any thoughts down in the comment section, or if you want to hit us up at the Lighting the Lamp Twitter, which is at lightingthelamb1. That is LAM1. Or you can hit me up at my personal, which is at LBG_Rob. Let me know what you guys think. Next week's episode will probably be wrapping up the trade deadline as we see what comes through and giving you guys our thoughts about what happened. So I want to thank you guys for watching, and I will see you guys again next time.